Hi, everyone. For those of you who are in our remote audience, we're just going to wait to let everyone in, and then we will begin. For those of you just joining us, we're just going to wait a moment for everyone to join, and then we will begin. Good afternoon, if you happen to be in the East Coast time zone. I am Pamela Nadell, Director of American University's Jewish Studies Program and a professor of history. Welcome to the final event in what has been a really remarkable series, Acts of Remembrance, Shaping Holocaust Memory in the 21st Century. We convened that this spring at American University. Our Jewish Studies program decided to run this series, and we did it in conjunction with two classes that we teach. One class, the history of the Holocaust, which is actually where those of us who are in person are right now, and another one on the history of Nazi Germany. And today, Professor Susan Rubin Suleiman will be joining us to discuss her forthcoming book. I got an advance copy. I want you all to see it. Daughter of History, a Memoir. And I also had the extraordinary privilege of reading it in advance, and it is very, very compelling. Before I introduce Professor Suleiman, I want to also thank the Mandel Center at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, which has brought us Julie Karestas, our Holocaust Studies postdoctoral fellow, which enabled us to offer the class on the history of Nazi Germany. Let me just remind you, for those of you who are joining us perhaps for the first time, American University wants to make all of its programs accessible. So it is possible, as you are watching, to activate closed captions, live subtitles, by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. If you have technical difficulties, we have a wonderful technical assistant, Eric Gordon. You can email him at egordon@american.edu. Or contact him through the chat. And today's session, as you can already see, is hybrid. So Professor Suleiman and I are in the physical classroom, and many of you are joining us in the virtual classroom. At the end of her presentation, we will take a few questions from the virtual classroom, and then we will end the session, and Professor Suleiman has graciously agreed to join the class in a conversation off camera. So now it is really a great honor for me to introduce Professor Suleiman. Susan Rubin Suleiman is the C. Douglas Dillon Research Professor, Emerita of the Civilization of France, and Research Professor of Comparative Literature at Harvard University. She was born in Budapest, something we're going to hear about, and emigrated to the United States as a child with her parents. She obtained her BA from Barnard College and her PhD from Harvard University, and she joined Harvard's faculty in 1981. Among her dozen books and more than 100 articles, she has written The Nemirovsky Question, The Life, Death, and Legacy of a Jewish Writer in the 20th Century, in 20th century France. And she has received numerous honors. They include a Guggenheim Fellowship, one of the most prestigious fellowships available. She received France's highest honor, the Légion d'honneur, and she was a Shapiro Senior Scholar in residence at the Mandel Center for the Advanced Holocaust Studies at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, where I don't know if you remember, but we actually met at dinner the night before you gave that talk. So I am delighted to welcome you to our classroom. Thank you. Join me in welcoming you.
Thank you, Pam, for that lovely introduction, and also for your invitation to talk about Daughter of History. this is a kind of sneak preview, if we can call it that, because the book won't be officially published until May 23rd. I'm really delighted to be here and hope that your questions afterward will help me to make my presentation of the book even better on other occasions. You can also email me with your suggestions and comments, which I will welcome. A good friend of mine, who is an experienced journalist, told me the other day that the question I should try to answer in giving this talk is, what should readers take away from this book? What are you trying to convey? This is not the same question as, what is this book about? He insisted. That question, after all, can be answered fairly quickly. It's about how my Orthodox Jewish family had the good fortune to survive the Holocaust in Budapest and eventually find refuge in the United States. It's about how we escaped from communist Hungary when I was 10 years old, about our sojourns in Vienna and Port-au-Prince, in Haiti. But that was at a time when Haiti was not quite as scary a place as it is now. And it's about our arrival in the United States, about my learning to speak English without an accent, about my burning ambition to be an American teenager like everybody else, above all, not different, about my success in realizing that ambition, and then years later, my success in creating an American life, getting married, having children, becoming a Harvard professor, as my mother never tired of boasting to her friends. Yes, the book is about all that, and also about childhood trauma and resilience, about what remains with you when many things are lost. But the more difficult question, what does it all mean? And what can it mean to you, my actual or potential readers, will take a bit longer to explore. So I'll leave it open for now and start at the beginning. By the way, I should say that this book was written almost entirely during the pandemic, at a time when there seemed to be nowhere else to go but inward. So let's see. Here are two photos of little Zhuzhika Rubin, taken in January or February 1944 in a fancy photography studio in Budapest. You can even see the name of the studio. It was called the Album of Smiles. A well-dressed young lady on the left, a well-dressed young lady, age 4, going out to do her daily shopping with her dog. And then a busy housewife, same age, is standing by her stove. These were sort of the slightly funny poses that they made you take in fancy photo studios. These were among a jumble of old photos that my sister and I found in a drawer after my mother died. She had carried them around since August 1949, when we escaped from Hungary. And at that point, there were just 3 of us, my parents and I, because my sister Judy was born later. I can imagine my mother on that summer day. She has to pack a suitcase, not too big, not too heavy. We are about to set out on foot across the border. What do you take with you on such an occasion? A few pieces of jewelry. There wasn't a whole lot anyway. Warm clothing. It's August, but you never know. And of course, some family photos. These days, many of them are creased or crumpled, noticeably the worse for wear, but they are among my most prized possessions, along with a silver pin that my mother often wore in Budapest, and a traveling chess set that my father bought when he knew that we would be leaving Hungary. My mother sent the first of these photos, that one there, to her sister, who was hiding somewhere in France. And she dated the message February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1944. The second one she sent undated, but I assume around the same time, to her older brother, Ijo, to the address of a forced labor camp. Now I know this because these photos are actually in the form of postcards. And here is the back of the one of me by the stove. The message reads, "With much love to my dear uncle from Zsuzsika. That was my sort of diminutive name in Hungarian. Um, and as you can see, his name is on there, and the KMSZ after that is short for Special Labor Service, which is a fancy way of saying forced labor for Jews. There's a postage stamp, so we know it went with a stamp, and we know it was mailed. And then there's also an official stamp, as you can see, that rectangular thing over there, which has a Hungarian word there, ellenőrizve, which means supervised or verified. So somebody, a censor or a supervisor of some kind, had to look over the card before it could be delivered. Yeah, it took me a while and some research to figure out what this was about. In 1940, the Hungarian army began conscripting Jewish men into forced labor. And my mother's two brothers were among them. At first, the conscripts were relatively well treated, if one can say that, about civilians forced to work long hours clearing woods and carrying rocks, undernourished and ill-clothed. Later, it got much worse. In the winter of 1943, the Hungarian army was routed by the advancing Soviet army in Ukraine at the River Don. Many thousands of regular troops were killed, and that battle is considered, for good reason, a national tragedy in Hungary. But they were fighting on the side of the Germans. They were allies of Germany. But the Jewish conscripts fared even worse, if that's possible. Seriously deprived of clothes and shoes and food, they were set to clearing minefields ahead of the regular troops. If they were not blown up, they starved or froze to death by the thousands, or died of exhaustion, or were beaten or shot. My uncle Ijo, who received this card, died in forced labor, although we never knew exactly where or when. His brother, who was in a different unit, had lost track of him early on. Now, was he dead by the time this postcard arrived, or did he receive it and smile at the absurd pose of his little niece? Either way, how did the picture get back to my mother? This was, I've come up with a few theories to explain that fact, but nothing quite fits. I can puzzle over every detail of this card and discover lots of interesting information. For example, the town of Zirc is in northwestern Hungary. So at this point, he was not in Russia or anywhere. Is in northwestern Hungary, not far from the birthplace of Hungary's first Catholic king, Saint Stephen. It's, I think, one of those ironies to put a forced labor camp in such a town. But there are some facts that I will never be able to explain, no matter how much I try. And that's including how this postcard got back to my mother. That's one of the things that I learned in writing this book. A life that you look back on is not like a tightly plotted novel where everything is in place, but like a set of snapshots held together by personal memory or by family stories with a lot of holes in them. This was a photo of Ijo. It was actually the ID photo that was taken when he registered for forced labor in December 1942. He was 38 years old at the time. I have no real memories of him, but recognize him on all the photos where he appears. I think he looks quite modern with his little owlish glasses. Now, here's another question that I have no answer to. What was my mother thinking, or what did she know, and what did she know when she took me to that fancy photo studio and had pictures made to send to her sister and brother in February 1944? Did she know about what was happening to Jews in Poland, or had already happened to Jews in Poland or Holland or France? Clearly, she could not know that almost exactly 1 month after that photo session, on March 19th, 1944, the German army would invade Hungary. As I mentioned, Hungary was an ally of Germany at this, but the Hungarian leader, Miklos Horthy was his name, was beginning to eye an exit from this alliance because he could see that Germany was losing the war. And so Hitler didn't like that, and he invaded Hungary. He also wanted to get his hands on the last piece of the Jewish question, of the solution of the Jewish question, because there were still a lot of Jews living in Hungary. So my mother couldn't know, for example, that Adolf Eichmann would soon arrive in Budapest to organize the deportation of Hungarian Jews, and that almost all of her extended family in the provinces, aunts, uncles, cousins, would perish in Auschwitz. Seen in hindsight, her taking me to the photographer like that seems almost frivolous, a kind of misplaced bourgeois ritual, you know. But then I tell myself that maybe she was hanging on to a feeling of normalcy when everything around her was so uncertain. She just wanted to affirm the life that was still possible. So as you can see, photos play a big role in my book, the way they do in so many other books about families and memory. But one of the scariest times in my life, which probably determined many of my later reactions and maybe even my whole character, has no photos to document it. Only a few scattered memories remained for many years, and their chronology was often hazy, or proved to be even downright wrong when I began to look at them closely. The memories themselves, however, which are like little bits of film clips, were super sharp. In some of them, I am running. My mother and I are running down the stairs of our apartment house in early morning and manage to leave the building, even though the concierge has seen us. We try to walk down the street normally as if we belong there, but as soon as we get to the corner, we make a mad dash, terrified that people are going to be following us. Then I am running in the dusty courtyard of the farm where she has left me with strangers. It's for my safety, she said, just before she disappeared. And I'm screaming with fear as a gaggle of geese chase after me, honking. The farmer's children laugh at the city girl in her fancy white leather shoes, afraid of geese. Once I reach the farmhouse, I wipe my tears and promise myself that they will never see me cry again. In a few days, I will be 5 years old. This was a memory that I suppressed for many, many years. But when I returned to Hungary as an adult with my 2 sons in 1984, I suddenly began to unforget, which means to remember, but I prefer unforget because it implies a kind of process. In this case, it was the process of allowing childhood memories to surface and wanting to write about them. The memories of running were the first things I remembered and wrote down. About the farm, I also remember that by the time my mother came to get me a few weeks later, I was playing barefoot with those same kids in that courtyard and hardly looked up when she tried to hug me. It took a number of years and quite a few therapy sessions for me to understand that episode of my childhood, when I felt myself so utterly abandoned and alone, had put into place an emotional mechanism that I would often rely on later. When confronted with a devastating loss, grit your teeth and move on. Now, psychologists call this resilience, the ability of some children to cope with traumatic experiences and become successful adults. Daughter of History is full of resilience, if I can put it that way. After the farm, I was with my parents and we pretended to be Christians. We had false papers. It was scary, always with the danger of making a mistake and being discovered, but I was proud of us too. Then when the war was over and we had survived, I was proud of that. Never mind all the other people I heard about who had been shot into the Danube, for example. The Jews of Budapest were never systematically deported because after months of cooperating with the Nazis in rounding up Jews, Horthy finally stopped the deportations in the summer of 1944. By then, over 400,000 Jews from the provinces had perished but about 100,000 survived in Budapest, which accounts for the fact that today Hungary has the largest Jewish population in Eastern Europe. When people ask me about this book, I always say that it's not a Holocaust memoir. And yet here I've been talking about nothing else. But everything that I've mentioned so far is in the first 2 chapters, and there are 10 more to follow. Although the book is not a Holocaust memoir, it's very much about history with a capital H, the kind that has a way of totally upending individual lives. I've long been fascinated with this phenomenon, including in my scholarly work, how one day you can be living your life peaceful and ordinary, and then the next day, everything has changed because some people that you've never met have made certain decisions that you were not informed about and that you had nothing to do with. Think of Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine last year. When I was trying to figure out the best title for this book, a friend who had just read my earlier memoir, Budapest Diary, reminded me of something that I had written there, which was, one is not only the child of one's parents, history too nourishes us or deprives us of nourishment. So why don't you call it Daughter of History, my friend said. And so I did. In a way, all those who have experienced war or revolution or emigration due to political upheaval are children of history. My family might never have left Hungary if it hadn't been for another war, the Cold War, which brought the Communist Party to power in Eastern Europe. Now here, hold on, here is a photo of my parents and me, just taken just a few months before we left Hungary in the spring of 1949. As you can see, we look quite prosperous now, as if the terrors of 1944 had never existed. My mother is wearing that silver pin, which I admired so much when my father gave it to her as a gift that year, and which I still own, but never wear. And here is a picture. So, and you can see me with my little curls and, you know, looking quite European. Okay, here I am at my graduation photo from high school in Chicago. This was no longer Zsuzsika, the little Hungarian girl, but Sue Rubin of Sen High School, an editor of the high school paper, and a proud member of the National Honor Society, on her way to Barnard College and to an education that would eventually land her at Harvard. And between those 2 incarnations, there was also a Suzanne, where I attended a French school during the months that we lived in Vienna, and also in Port-au-Prince. I knew French way before I ever learned English. And of course, there was the whole process in between of becoming American, which took several years. It started even before we arrived in the US, somewhat inauspiciously, I'm afraid, on our way from Vienna to the New World, which included an enchanting 2 weeks in Paris. I think that too may have determined the rest of my life. We had a brief stopover between 2 planes in Munich. And there we met a man who came to meet us, actually, who I think was a friend of my American uncle, a Hungarian American, because I'm pretty sure we spoke Hungarian with him. We sit in the airport cafeteria, and while the grown-ups have coffee, he orders a drink for me that he says I will love. Everyone in America does. It's bubbly and black and comes in an oddly shaped bottle that the waiter hands to me with a straw. I take a sip. It's sweet yet medicinal, foul tasting. I have a hard time not spitting out. Well, how do you like it? The man asked with a broad smile. I cannot bring myself to reply. You have to get used to it, he says. You'll see, you'll love it. I wonder whether I have failed an important test. Is this a foretaste of what awaits me once we finally reach America? I mean, if I have to love to learn this concoction that Americans are crazy about, I will never become a real American. I have to say that I've been an American now for almost 7 decades, but I confess I've never learned to love Coke or Pepsi. Um, uh, my second initiation into American food occurred about a year later in January 1951, just a few weeks after we arrived in New York City. Like so many other immigrants, we paid courtesy calls, day after day, to people from the old country who had been in the States for a while, hoping that they would give us greenhorns, tips on how to do things. One such visit was to a Hungarian lady who owned a successful hair salon on Fifth Avenue. I think she may have spoken to me in English since I had already managed to learn some English due to Little Lulu comics. Come, she says, I want to show you something. We walk into her kitchen and she sits me down at the breakfast table, then opens a cabinet and takes out a cardboard box. It's Sunday afternoon, way past breakfast time, but it's never too late to eat cereal, she says. She fills a bowl with what look like small pebbles, pours in some milk, then smiles. Voila, give a taste. Suddenly, I remember the man in Munich. And will this new food miracle be another unpleasant surprise? I asked myself. But Rice Krispies turned out to be delicious. And the little pebbles really do make a crackling sound. So maybe becoming American will not be as difficult as I feared. Now, by the time my high school yearbook photo was taken, all those early experiences were past history. But after becoming a perfect American teenager, how did I end up as a globe-trotting professor of French literature? That road back to Europe is another story, which I tell in the book, but which I will leave you to discover if you read it. So what do I hope that readers will take away from Daughter of History, to get back to the original question? Resilience is good. It allows you to put the past behind you and move forward, be a success, but it also comes at a price. It may make you wary of intimacy, for example, because after all, other people can often hurt you or even destroy you. And it may make you forget where you come from, because after all, adapting to new circumstances, surviving and thriving, whatever the cost, is your goal. Writing this book has helped me to reckon with the costs of resilience. That objects like old photos or the silver pin, which are still with me, or like the red bicycle that I received for my 10th birthday in Budapest, which I had to leave behind forever a few weeks later, have helped me to organize my memories. That's why every chapter in the book has an object as a title: postcard to Ziertz, traveling chess set, green and white Chevrolet, fraternity pin. So if I have time, do I still have a bit of time? Yes. I would like to read just a few paragraphs from the prologue, where some of these same ideas are expressed in a more literary form. So here we are. This is called The Silver Pin. She had pinned it on the collar of her black dress for the formal photo. A silver flower, long and slender, the sculpted leaves spreading on both sides of the stylized petals, with 2 symmetrically placed pearls in the middle. Today, it has little or no commercial value. The pearls are slightly yellowed. Wait, let's see if I, the pearls are slightly yellowed, and if one looks closely, one sees many imperfections on their surface. But back then in Budapest, whenever I saw my mother wearing it, I thought of it as a precious thing. My father gave it to her shortly before the photo session, a sign of prosperity and survival. And of love, too, for despite their being profoundly mismatched, as I came to think later, a passionate bond existed between them. They had married for love against his father's wishes, had survived the war with their only child, and soon they would be seeking a new life, far away from the world they knew. Even in my adolescent rages against them, I had to admit they did not lack courage or pluck. That last photo session in Budapest took place in the spring of 1949, a few months before we left Hungary. Mother had curled my hair for the occasion in long corkscrew curls that hung down to my shoulders, and she too had been to the hairdresser. I can imagine her thinking, capture this moment before we turn our back on it. 5 years earlier, we had been hiding from the Nazis in a house in Buda with false papers, false names. But that too was behind us now. Nessa, my 5-year-old granddaughter, has been exploring the wooden box on top of my dresser in which I keep earrings and a few odd pieces of jewelry. When she finds the silver pin, she turns to me. Why did you ever wear this, Amy? It's pretty. Pins are for dressing up, I tell her. And in these days of the corona, as she calls it, we don't dress up much. But suddenly I have an idea. Here's a little test for you. A test? Her eyes sparkle. She loves challenges. Pen in hand, we stand in front of the family photos that I have hung in the hallway. Look carefully at the picture of me and my parents. Do you see this pin anywhere? The picture shows the three of us, Lily and Miklos seated close to each other and me between them. It's high up on the wall. Nessa needs a stepping stool. She climbs on it, looks up, straining to see. Your mom was wearing it, she exclaims triumphantly. Strangely, I don't remember her ever wearing the pin after we came to America. Was this modest relic of post-war Budapest unworthy in her eyes? Or was it associated with a country and a city that she had no desire to remember? It occurs to me that maybe she did wear the pin in America, and it is I who have blocked it from memory. During my adolescence, I was desperate to be American, just like everyone else, unmarked by signs of difference. Did the pin, which I had found splendid in Budapest, become a reminder of our foreignness? I had adored my mother back there, so beautiful and lively, always willing to play one more game of numbers. What's 6 times 4, 5 plus 8, 30 minus 7, or read me one more story. But I was often ashamed of her in America, the immigrant mother who never learned to speak English properly, and whose insistent voice with its deep vowels in the back of the throat never adapted to measured tones. Now I feel ashamed with a different kind of shame when I think about how little I valued her as an adult. But there's anger there too. I valued her, but there's anger there too. If I gradually became incapable of feeling love for her, or for expressing love, which in a sense is the same thing, was it not her fault as well as mine? She loved me, I knew, and admired my successes. Although she didn't read my books, she was proud that I had written them. But she was tactless, I tell myself. She didn't know how to listen. She was interested only in material things. Rich or poor, it's good to have money, she would often say with a laugh, repeating a joke that she had heard somewhere, as if to excuse herself or to admonish me. Yet others loved her. After her death in Miami Beach, I kept hearing from people who had known her. She had been the belle of Lincoln Road, one old lady told me. She had 1,000 friends. She was fun to be with. My sister and I often talk about her now. She could be impossible, we say, but she was brave and energetic and had lived through a lot. We inherited her photographs and her few pieces of jewelry. The silver pin came to me, along with a delicate gold orchid that she had acquired in America. I put that one in my jewelry box. The silver pin disappeared into a jumble of old trinkets in a drawer. Devalued, like my mother in America? Yes, but not discarded, waiting. A few years ago, I dug out the pin from the drawer and after vigorous rubbing with silver polish, managed to get it to shine. I even pinned it on a black jacket before heading out to teach. The gold orchid, when I wear it, reminds me of my mother, but it is simply a pretty object, carrying no strong emotion. The silver pin evokes bruises and ambivalence, emotional knots difficult to untangle. I only wore it once. Proust's narrator, in that most famous passage of the novel where he dips a mud lead into a cup of tea, discovers that the taste revives a whole past world and time intact. The immense edifice of In Search of Time Lost emerges from that single moment of revelation, what he calls involuntary memory. But of course, that's an artistic conceit, not how things really were or happened. In real life, Proust spent several years and embarked on false starts before arriving at the structure of the novel, and he kept adding to it up to the day of his death. He compared his book to a cathedral, immense but not quite finished. What really matters in the search for lost time, we discover, is the process itself, and the result will not be a perfect whole, but a life in pieces. In 2019, in that far-off time before COVID, I moved to the Washington, D.C. area to be near my younger son and his family, after retiring from more than 3 decades of teaching at Harvard University. 6 months later, I, who was often in a plane to somewhere, found myself, like so many others, forced to stay put. My imposed stillness propelled me toward my relics. For religious true believers, relics are sacred remains associated with a saint or a deity. My relics are ordinary objects, but they carry an emotional charge. The silver pin, old black and white photographs, the miniature chess set my father bought before we left Hungary. Some are not even material, but exist only in my memory. A fraternity pin from a boyfriend that I wore for a few months in college, a recording of Heifetz playing the Beethoven violin concerto. I cannot expect my relics to help me achieve wholeness, but I can aspire to reconciliation. In accounting, reconciliation is a process of ensuring that 2 sets of records are in agreement. In human relations, reconciliation is the process of mending a broken relationship. In my history, the records are often missing, and the gaps and blanks can only be filled by imagination, or else must be left open. Is it possible to mend a broken relationship with a person who is no longer there to participate in the process? Can one mend a broken relationship to time and space, to home? How many cities have I called home? No straight lines, but zigzags, breaks, departures, returns. What is the opposite of broken? Intact, unbroken, unbreaking. The process by which the broken is mended with the cracks still showing. Thank you. So, should I?
From Sheila Franklin. She says she is a Senn High School graduate. She wants to know what year did you graduate and what year did you
I graduated high school when I was not even 17 in 1956, and I lived in the north side of Chicago, not too far from the lake, and I went to Nicholas Senn High School. I think one of its claim to fame is that Scott Simon, the NPR host, is also a graduate of Senn High School.
Any others? All right, well, then, thank you very much.
Somebody has her hand up.
Well, we're gonna have questions from the class, but we'll break and we'll end the online portion, and then we're gonna have a conversation with the class. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you missed some of this, we will have Professor Suleiman's lecture will be available on our YouTube channel. All right, thank you so much. Thanks, that was great. That was so good. Yeah.